One of the many effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, and especially of all the lockdown measures, has been the dramatic increase in people reporting mental health issues, something which in our 21st century context was already high. There's no doubt that the effects of isolation and of social distancing have exacerbated depression, anxiety, loneliness, low self-esteem, sleep problems, stress and many other issues. Mental health, in truth, is a spectrum of symptoms and affects different people to different degrees. Every human being has a level of mental health just as we do physical health. And all the evidence is that over the last 6 months or so, many people have moved along that spectrum and are struggling. Because I think it's true to say that we can even feel lonely in a crowd. So what we're really talking about here, I think, is a quality of relationship. We're talking about a depth of connection with other human beings. If that's missing, if we feel no one cares about us or no one understands us, then many of us really are going to struggle. There's an extensive evidence base about the impact of loneliness and social isolation on people's lives, on their relationships and on their well-being. It really is a serious public health concern. There's even research going on into what they call digital exclusion. In other words, how those without the internet and associated technology in the Western world may suffer because of that lack of that outlet. Now that remains to be proven, but all research certainly points to the fact that a lack of meaningful human contact leads to higher rates of all sorts of illnesses and even premature mortality. Now this is all very complex, and mental health professionals have a whole range of tools and approaches and interventions which they can and do use to great effect. But what I do want to suggest today is that one thing that can really help everyone is meaningful connection with other human beings. Now I think it's true to say that we all have different personalities and different needs. I myself have a type of personality which is described by the Myers-Briggs indicators as introverted. Now that doesn't mean that I want to be alone all the time. What it means is that I gain a lot of my strength, that my batteries, as it were, recharge better when I'm on my own, or maybe when I'm alone with God too. Other people are much more energized by being with other people. They thrive by being with other people. They would most likely be identified as having an extroverted personality. Again, I think we all exist somewhere along that introverted and extroverted spectrum. But we all benefit from both meaningful relationships and from having some space too. The Christian belief, rooted in the Bible from Genesis onwards, is that we human beings were made for relationship with God and with each other. It is not good for the man to be alone, God says, just before Eve is created. Jesus himself lived that truth out, investing time and energy in other people, and especially in his 12 disciples. There's something about true community which is an essential mark of what it means to follow Jesus. Christians simply cannot exist in isolation from each other. It just doesn't work. My experience has often been that many churches offer superficial community, but that many fewer are able to provide a deep, nurturing and caring place for all. I personally long for a deeper level of spiritual kinship. Maybe you do too. And I believe that now, when churches aren't able to meet in large gatherings, is the time to focus on building true community. At the same time, I've got to remind myself that community isn't the goal, it's actually the means. It's the means to nothing less than us flourishing as human beings. While it's good to enjoy the embrace of people who care for each other, Groups of people with an inward focus just don't last. They need a greater purpose. Here are just 3 reasons then why Christian community is so important. First, our spiritual community is there to spur us on to a deeper understanding of God, growing our connection with Him and our interdependence too. I'm not talking here about another meeting or another Bible study. We don't need more knowledge. We need more experience. We need life on life. The result of growing spiritually is to put our faith in action, not inaction. So we need to find a way of connecting with each other that isn't just another thing to do, but which actually contributes to all of us flourishing in the whole of our lives. Secondly, the New Testament gives us a picture of a church where everyone has an important role to play. There wasn't just one minister or vicar who did everything. I mean, did you know that the word minister actually means servant? God gives everyone gifts and talents so that we can all contribute to the church family and to God's work in the world. And so, within real community, we become ministers to one another. We serve one another. And then we move beyond our community to serve those outside it and further afield. We teach and we learn by doing, and we model by our actions. We learn to listen to God's Spirit, and then we do what He says. He might not always make sense. It might be scary, and sometimes, yes, it might require us stepping out into something new. But God isn't asking us to play it safe. He's asking us to make a difference. A third reason for Christian community is that it's a platform for service, for serving others, to demonstrate the love of Jesus to the world around us. And when we serve without an agenda or an expectation, we surprise people by loving them as God loves them. And yes, though we hope to point people to Jesus through our actions, the motivation is not to proselytize, it's to love people in practical ways, because it's what Jesus did. But you may ask, well, isn't this just what the church is supposed to be and do? Well, yes, it is. It's exactly what we're meant to do. And we, you and I, are the church. In a COVID-19 world, serving others is going to be one of the key marks of the church. It's going to define us more and more. It starts then with responding to the heart of God, and it happens when we are part of a community of faith. How then are we going to approach all this in the COVID-affected world in which we live? Well, we just don't know how any future lockdowns may affect us here in the home valley. But we're certainly going to have to get used to, I think, meeting in smaller units of people for the time being. And it seems to me very much the perfect time now to create smaller groups of people which are actually expressions of church in themselves. Now, we're tentatively calling these groups bubbles. Now, the reason is quite obvious, I think, it's part of the language we use in the pandemic that we've been living with. We're happy to receive better ideas for a group. Just let us know, though. But bubbles essentially are groups made up of no more than 6 adults plus their children, and they're designed to be supportive, to be energizing, and to be life-giving. They are certainly not about another thing in the diary or something which adds burdens to already busy lives. Let me say that again. They are designed to be supportive, to be energizing, and to be life-giving. Not another thing to desperately try to cram into our diaries. Now, bubbles could meet in person when strict restrictions allow. Could meet in a garden, in a home, in a public place. They could be based around interests, or they could be based around stage of life. So, for example, you could form a unit with other retired people, with other people who have young children, with other people who have older children, or a group could be much broader. I'm really not going to dictate how this works. Rather, what we're trying to work out is the right approach for individuals, for you, and for your family. And that will vary. There's just no one size fits all. These bubbles can meet as often as works for you. And it may be that on occasions I'll organise for a few of them to get together with me to do something in particular. But I think flexibility is the key to all of this. And during times when it's impossible to get together, such as during a lockdown or other restrictions, maybe you can keep in touch in other ways. On the phone, via Zoom, email, WhatsApp, or any number of other ways. Finally then, why are we encouraging you all to join a bubble? Well, the first aim is to provide a means of support for each person in their current circumstances, whatever they may be. Having a small group of fellow Christians who you know will be there for you, praying for you, keeping you connected to the wider church can actually make a huge difference. Secondly, these groups can be a place to grow in faith, a place to ask honest questions, a place where we can get to know God better and one another better too. There are lots of ways of doing all this, and I will work with you to make your group operate in a way which works for you. So, the key then is for these groups to work in a way which is flexible and which is helpful for members, not to impose a particular way of operating, although I can offer support and suggestions along the way. I'm going to give you all the next few weeks to think about this, to pray about this, maybe to talk, hopefully to talk with others in the wider church family, and maybe come back to me with groups that you might like to be in. But then after this next month or so, I'm going to be proactive in helping us all find a bubble which actually works for us. You can download the leaflet from the church website which explains all this and more. If you want a paper copy, let me know and I'll get one out to you. Let me tell you, I'm committed to this, and I'm committed to it for a few reasons. One, because circumstances mean we're just going to have to operate in smaller groups of people, possibly for quite some time. That's a reality. It's been forced upon us. Secondly, because I think they are essential to us, flourishing as human beings, and they're essential to us flourishing as a church for the future. And thirdly, I believe it's something that God really wants to happen. Maybe this pandemic is going to enable the church to thrive and to serve others in a new way, which is actually a lot closer to the church of the first disciples than what most of us have known in our lifetimes. So, friends, may God speak to us all. May He show us how we can enjoy true community in these smaller units of people. May He show us who we're going to connect with in the first instance. And may God bless us all and enable us to flourish as individuals, but as individuals within true Christian community, for our sakes and for the sake of the world. Amen.